the topic that I was going to discuss was in new Fear of God collection, which was presented at the Hollywood Bowl.
Hollywood Bowl,
very
of course.
Kanye style to have like that level of production for a fashion show, which I wanted to get into. But one of the things that I kind of is like a topic in common is LA core and the rise of LA core and how that sort of it is, I think, like a distinct style. And to Blake's defense, we were talking about Heli Slimane and his ingenuity at SLP. Is there maybe a reverse colonialism going on? Because Heli Slimane is Mr. King Pears over here kind of ripping off LA in a sense.
And he's white.
Well, I mean, outside of LA, also having a lot of white. I didn't describe racial bias to like the LA style because I'm just not that knowledgeable in terms of the art history, I guess, of where that comes from. But if he's of that area and he says that people have been dressing like that for a while, and this speaks to their sensibilities, obviously he brought it to an international stage for like mass consumption. But that's colonialism for the bougie people to get in there and learn about like ripped jeans and the flannels and everything. So don't get it backwards. Don't say like SLP was the OG of this shit if they're so kind of mining from the same corridors of the Inland Empire or wherever. So that's my defense there. But what I came on here to kind of discuss was I guess another LA brand. But before that, I want to kind of bring up the fact that like I'm not particularly familiar with Amiri's work or like exactly how many designers kind of work in that vein. But I do feel like since like Celine has grown to the way it has and Hetty's brand has mostly stayed the same in that zone, that people are catching on and that they realize there's an international audience for this sort of, I guess, production, which is sort of like adjacent to streetwear, but it's not really streetwear, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's usually, I think, in terms of like brand perception, a matter of distribution as to like what we, I think, kind of feel about each individual brand. I feel like that usually comes to the place where like people, like he brought up like post 2019, I feel like there is an over distribution of Amiri, and that stuff is like popping up in like the sort of like I don't know if you know of like this thing called Heat or something like that. The mystery subscription boxes
for like overstock, right?
Yeah, and like the fact that like Amiri's pieces like are constantly on perma-sale and like send sales and stuff like that. I feel like there is a bit of over distribution going on, so that can like lead to like a negative brand.
I do want to. This is something I've actually been.
There's a lot of different elements.
There's a lot. This is something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately because one of the brands that I look for the most is Enfant Riche de Prime, another kind of like LA brand, right, that we've talked about before. And they've been doing this thing recently where, at least to my eyes, they have been making new deals with their stockists and not allowing them to put them on sale and maybe cutting back on some of the bigger stockists. And it's had an insane effect on the resale market. Like Grailed prices for all the stuff has shot up because these things aren't on sale at their stockists anymore for, 50% off or whatever.
Yeah, and I do feel like it's not like a gatekeeping thing as much as like, I guess, trying to keep the core of what the brand does special and not like turning it into Givenchy, which I feel like, or like Burberry, which I feel like are like the worst examples of like how brands get devalued by like just trying to make something to be in every store. Yeah. So outside of that, I do feel like there is like, I think a movement of like European money kind of moving in and giving a chance to like these sort of creative directions, chief among them being this sort of ascension of like the Bally guy, or I guess more what people would say the Rude guy. I'm hesitant to try to pronounce his name because I'm going to butcher it. I've never like heard it spoken out loud. It begins with like V or something like that. But like the fact that like Bally is like also going like a traditionally Swiss leather goods house is going super hard into like LA core means that like I don't think it's like a dying trend. I feel like they have like identified that there is like a strong consumer base who is an audience for that sort of thing.
Oh, the guy.
But can I make a point? But what if they're wrong? Like I don't know. I don't want to be a jerk, but like what if people in LA dress bad and
But
They don't
it
read
doesn't
any
matter
book.
if it's bad. Like I'm not the customer for this at all. Like I'm the guy who like goes to like DRM and like tries to stay away from the basement. I mean Dover Street Market, DSM, and tries to stay away from the basement, right? So like I'm not that guy. But I do think that that there is this audience and that they're willing to pay a premium price point for luxurious materials and that sort of like styling that I think has proven like more than a decade in at this point to be kind of like a timeless market, right? Like there's always going to be the people who buy this sort of thing, and I think that's something that like can speak to a certain kind of consumer. Like the Rude is like almost synonymous with LA these days. I feel like that came a bit later than Amiri, and like I think it's got like their distribution game sort of in a similar place, but like they try to I think keep the like voice of the brand particularly strong. Like it doesn't kind of like devolve into be like a denim or like a small leather goods accessory brand. Like there is like I think a stronger voice in terms of like what Rude brings to the table in terms of like it's ready to wear. But like with the ascension of like the creative director to his work at Bally, and like of course adding like a zero to the end of some of these pieces that like of course Bally does. I think there is like along with like how Celine is doing well and everything. Like I think there is like it's here to stay. It's not gonna rotate out like the tie-dye, unfortunately.
Wait, you know what?
Whoa.
No, I'm not jokes. I'm just making jokes. I'm just making jokes.
Okay,
tie-dye will come back and rear its head every 15 years or so. It's fine.
Doesn't matter. I spent $10 on the shirt. Can I ask really quick a few things? What should we call you, friend?
First, okay, I guess my name is Al. That's how you pronounce it. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. The second thing I want to ask, just because out of curiosity, I mean, we got the two of you guys on here. You're like, these are like the minds of a mastermind. I had no idea that people who were smart wanted to listen to this. Out of curiosity, could you tell us a little bit more about like what the two of you do? You're both connoisseurs, it seems, and I'm kind of curious. Blake, are you willing to tell us what your profession is?
I work in tech. But I don't really want to say who I work for, if that's okay. And I actually wanted to touch on that a little bit because it's sort of, I think fashion has a little bit to do with your lifestyle as well. And in your lifestyle, I don't drink. I don't go out to the bar. I don't go to the club. When I go out, it's kind of an event, so, I'm a gamer. And I work in tech. So when I go out, it's like the celebrity styling element almost sort of plays to the fun of going outside for me, like to getting dressed.
I 100% get that. I relate to that totally.
Yeah. And before people, put me up to the Amiri cross, I guess, I also want to say that I'm a fan of a lot of other brands too. Like I've got some Rick Owens, I like Palm Angels. I've experimented in a lot of places. I feel like in the high streetwear.
Palm Angels, another very LA type of brand.
Brands are very LA vibes. And I will admit, I think that it is undeniable that this style is in demand and popular. I think it's undeniable to say that this has staying power because we're talking about like 2019. I mean, really, I feel like this vibe and aesthetic, it rings true to like 2012 for me. This has been going for a while. And I don't know what else to say. I guess you guys are right. I guess you win.
I think maybe we're out of touch, you know what I mean? Or at least just out of the loop on a certain side of things. Because I think it's fair that I never understood the side of things like the vintage WWE t-shirts like of John Cena or whatever, and how those end up in these shops for $150. The sort of grab a pair of Levi's and patch it up, customize it, it feels like very LA things. You know what I mean?
It's the swap meet aesthetic originally, I think, and then it kind of grows.
Yeah.
And the weather's different, so go ahead.
I guess just to introduce myself, I'm a rando. I don't like working any sort of creative thing. I do like a tech IT thing similar to Blake, which gives me the money to kind of travel around and kind of see different sort of things and shop in different Dover Street Market sales. I've shopped at sales at LA and shopped at sales in London, and was gonna buy something from Paris, but I had to go. Anyway, so like my taste kind of like in terms of the sort of things fall not really on like the LA style sort of thing, but I do feel like it's interesting in terms of like where it's developed, because for a while it was kind of synonymous with streetwear, but like streetwear is its own thing, and I think it's possible to like distinguish between the two, and how like what customers are speaking to. But what I was going to say is something that I kind of blanked on.
That's okay.
Which question you asked Blake about like lifestyle or something like that? No, I think that there is like a lifestyle component to like the pieces and like kind of what they represent and like the kind of community that they represent. One of the things that I wanted to bring up and my reason for like hopping on is I wanted to discuss the Fear of God 8th Collection show.
Yes.
And like the sort of pieces that they were doing. So I do feel like, interestingly enough, even though like I think Fog was on the forefront of like that sort of style, like kind of exploding into the mainstream, and with the success of like Essentials, and it's a worldwide sensation. And it's almost like to the point of parody now, where it's its own thing. And
Pusha T.
Pusha T
I know him
at the show. But also hilariously, that's a weird connection where like some I think like of the leading figures in the LA style come from Virginia. First of all, like Pusha T is like has been working in that lane ever since he shuttered Play Clothes, his streetwear style. I think he found the LA style and has kind of worked from there because of like I think finding him through Jerry Lorenzo. And also from Virginia is Sean Witherspoon, who kind of popularized, I think, like vintage tee going hard, and that being like a whole culture in and of itself.
Can I? So I, at the risk of completely derailing this, real quick, does anyone want to explain why I've been seeing a plethora of YouTube videos shitting on Sean Witherspoon, whatever his name is, lately? What happened to this guy?
I think he just kind of became like the face of an entire thing. And when that happens, you get haters. Like I don't think too hard about that.
I wouldn't know. I became that face of
everything.
Stupid idiots, and I get a lot of shit for that.
But what I wanted to say before I like forget my thing again, was that I think that with this new collection and like the kind of pieces that he's showing and the sheer amount of outerwear that there is, which really isn't that necessary for LA. LA doesn't get that cold. No, I think what this is that like it's kind of an embracing of I remember what reminded me of this in Blake's talk when he talked about Palm Angels, which is an Italian brand. Like it's LA's fuck, but it's like based in Italy and all that. I think there is a lot of Italian money in the brand as well, because there's this sort of like confluence of like Zegna and their collaboration that they're doing like a few years back with Fear of God. And like that didn't sort of like turn into like an ongoing like product line, collaboration or not, was with Zegna. Like they made like a lot of pieces like the following season after that collaboration that like kind of explored that. But I don't think they distributed those pieces too much or what have you. But like a lot of the newer collections, I don't think are heading in that direction. But what's interesting is that like when the Zegna collaboration popped off, I think Jerry Lorenzo really glommed onto what Zegna was doing with tailoring and like the sort of possibilities that were open with like getting access to their product ranges in terms of like sheer fabric manufacture. Zegna is like a very like vertically integrated company, and since they like manufacture and even develop a lot of their own textiles, and they helped even make some for like a lot of luxury companies in Italy. And I think like Jerry Lorenzo wants to be that kind of guy. He wants to be like getting like custom fabrics and like super luxurious shit directly from like the Zegna factories. And I think like he's evolving in that direction, which I think is like an exciting new way forward. If you look at the collection, like the crazy like heaviness of like the outerwear and the sensibilities that he's bringing to those textiles, I think is something new.
Hit it, Christian.
I wanted to say something.
He's eager.
Listen, the thing is that I want to admit is that sometimes our brains, we could be intellectually think that something's, I don't know, weak, but we're attracted to it anyway. And I'll admit this on pod. I'm admitting this live. I think every Fear of God collection I've liked. I'd wear any of that. That collection we just saw, that looks pretty cool to me.
So as far as the LA brands go, very unique and interesting.
Yeah, and Jerry Lorenzo has definitely evolved over time.
Oh, yeah.
There has been a huge difference. You know, I mean, when he started, people basically called him a Rick Owens knockoff. Then they called him another type of knockoff. But I can understand some of it. I can understand some criticism in looking at some of these designs or looking at some of the history, Mike Amiri and Lorenzo, and saying like, this is derivative, or it's like, it's not really pushing any boundaries. This is all marketing, yada, yada, yada. I don't know if that necessarily matters. I don't know. Sometimes I think that this community, the high fashion community, gets really caught up in their own, like, I don't know, the stupidity, where they obsess over like they need to be correct or they need to be cool in some maybe East Coast way. Maybe what Kilian and I need to do, we do a podcast in LA. We move out there. We get like a beach house, whatever. We start to take in the LA vibes, 420 style. And then we start to relax. And then we start to like these clothes more because we're not so obsessed with trying to impress somebody. We just
we gotta lay back, man.
And we just gotta get laid. Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Come on.
That's one thing I wanted to say about Jerry Lorenzo too, is his presence in leisure wear is very interesting to the average consumer or even someone who's outside of streetwear. And for me, and in my experience, we've had a little outlet mall in my town for God knows how long, and only recently they opened a sneaker store there with the recent boom. And like, of course, they have the little clothing rack next to the sneakers. And what do they got there? The Fear of God essentials.
Yeah,
you know, so it's like for any random consumer, it's an easy entry point into luxury. It's an easy entry point into the Fear of God mainline. It's a relaxed aesthetic that I think appeals to people here.
Dude, essentials has to be one of the best like vertical integration decisions that any designer has made, because the price point, it's so accessible. It's just that one step up from just buying Nike stuff or whatever, and it ladders right up into mainline Fear of God. You know,
maybe we should start to get more religious. Maybe we'd be better at business then.
Yeah, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, the three. I'm into it, man.
Yeah, and I will say this, and this is the last nice thing I'll say. This years ago, like maybe a decade ago or something like that, I was doing, resale stuff. One of the items that we got in was a Fear of God hoodie. And I thought it was really nice. It was the nicest quality hoodie I think I've ever handled. That's all I'll say.
Well.
That's all I'll say. Guys, what do you think of my outfit?
Hit it. Yeah.
Is this good? Is this fashion?
Wow.
Now that's a New York fit. If I've
Can you guys get me a job?
Yeah, we'll make some calls.
I'm selling clothes.
I think that's the best 420 fit I've seen in a while.
You should tuck the front of your shirt into your like tiny shorts, to be aggressively European. That's the thing that you can do.
There you go.
You should have
a little more exciting.
I didn't realize they were actually swim trunks. Okay.
French tuck.
Amazing. Yeah, you look like you're right off the Riviera. But a thing I was going to say is that like these diffusion brands like popping off is like like a double-edged sword, right? Because the last thing you want to do is become like a mere Armani. That's what I want to say. Armani, which in the mid 2000s, I feel like their brand did get devalued into the tank due to the excess number of diffusion brands and the success and presence of those diffusion brands over the main line in the cultural, milieu. And like what has kind of happened due to the success of essentials is that like it is popping out of control. I think that it forced an evolution in Jerry Lorenzo's aesthetic for his mainline. Like he has to move to like the super premium outerwear stuff in his mainline because he's got to differentiate from like how good like Essentials is, because he didn't hold back with that line. He was like, okay, what can we do at this price point? I'm going to give them everything. I'm not going to try to like cheap them out outside of like, I guess, putting like the Essentials logo across everything. So, it's not mainline. And you can't mistake it for mainline from like a logomania sense.
Yeah.
But like outside of that, like there's not really much difference in terms of cut or even like the quality of the manufacturing. So that's admirable in one sense, in that like it kind of like I think welds people to his brand once people like can kind of see like with the distribution of the diffusion line that there is something for them there in that aesthetic. But like popping off with a diffusion line kind of like I think always puts into question like I guess like if you want to be New York and snobbish and like intellectual about it, the kind of artistic direction of the mainline. A good example from a couple of podcast episodes ago would be Heaven, which is popping off way more than Marc Jacobs these days, right?
Yeah,
you don't want to be overshadowed by your own diffusion line, I feel.
True.
And I think some brands have handled it well. I mean, Miu Miu could be described as a diffusion brand, but Prada has obviously translated that to be a different aesthetic with same DNA. Who else do good diffusion lines? Dark Shadow.
That's what I was just about to say. Dark Shadow.
The way you do it is you make a diffusion line where the clothes are still $800.
Indistinguishable from mainline, right? Yeah.
It's like easy that way. Yeah. But Marc Jacobs, his other diffusion lines, I think really tanked his company or his logo label for a while. So I definitely agree with the sentiment. And I could definitely agree that maybe Jeremy Lorenzo, maybe like just in general, they're looking at the landscape and they're saying, well, we need to evolve and push this brand into things that you can't get from Essentials, you can't get from Yeezy Gap, you can't get from whoever else is trying to make an affordable premium hoodie or whatever.
Right.
And I've been saying this for a while. I guess it's not going to happen, but I thought tailoring was going to be the hot trend. Maybe it will eventually, but
I mean that's what like Vogue is trying to like make happen, right? Like, but the idea of like evolving to the point where you're not fighting ALD, you're fighting like what Loro Piana for customers. Like that's crazy. That's a great evolution.
Right.
Yeah. Do you guys want to talk about Quiet Luxury? I was making a video about Quiet Luxury. I edited half of it, and then I said, nah. There are too many TikToks about it right now. It's a waste of my time. But we talked about Loro Piana. We talked about Xenia. Brunello Cucinelli. We can get him in the mix. They use a lot of colors that are very reminiscent of that Fear of God stuff. But hold on. Let's get a rein on this podcast because this is an hour long. We've got our guests came on here with their galaxy brains. They both work in tech, but they could listen, I know people who are professors at Parsons. You guys should move to New York and start teaching at Parsons. That's what I'm trying to say. Kilian, do you want to add on to that? What are you thinking? What are you thinking in terms of how we should continue this episode right now?
Oh boy. I'm wondering, so to me, what this feeds into very well is we were going to talk about Coachella.
Yeah.
Very LA, very celebrity style focus.
Should we keep our panelists